In addition to sorting, I can also use filters to change the way my data looks and be able to focus in on important information while excluding some of the more extraneous information that I don't really need. So to do that, I come over here and I can use these same drop-down arrows I would use to sort internally. And let's start with row labels. If you click that, you'll notice since I have two fields in the row labels, I have the option to choose the field up here. And that's important to remember because if you forget that you have more than one field, it's always going to default to the top field, and you'll be filtering and wondering why your lower field isn't filtering the way you want it to. So we have to choose the field to filter. I'm going to choose associate in this case. You can see I've got my standard options you might be familiar with from Excel already, where I can just exclude Jorge, for instance, by unchecking his box and saying OK. And now Jorge is out of the list. Well, then I can come back here, and again I've got to change this to associate. I can add Jorge back in or just hit select all. And I have other options. I've got label filters that allow me to filter based on the label, so I can say whether it contains something specific. Maybe it's a product and I want it to contain 1008 because I know that belongs to a certain category. Maybe it ends with a certain letter or begins with the letter C. I can do different things like that. I can also do between or not between. And then under value filters, here's where we can come in here and change to say I want it to be show people who have values greater than a certain number, less than a certain number. In this case, that would be files processed. I could also do top 10. So maybe I want to see who my top performers are with processing files. I'm going to click on top 10, and you'll see that you actually have options beyond just 10. If I want to see who my top 2 performers are, I'm going to change that to top 2. I could also do bottom 2 if I wanted to. And you can also choose the field if you had multiple fields in there. I'm going to say OK, and now it's filtered it out for me. The problem is I can't really tell if that's accurate. So a lot of times when you're working with filters, you're going to want to come over here under the Design tab in the ribbon and turn on your grand totals. So I'm going to turn them on for rows and columns. And I can see now that my values are 1400 and 1389 for Team A. Let me check to see if it did that correctly. I'm going to come in here to Associate and clear the filter. This is where you can always clear your filter. And sure enough, those were the two highest values. Now, keep in mind, just like before with sorting, since these are grouped by team, it's only going to filter within that team. If I wanted to filter at the associate group as a whole, I would need to remove the team grouping. I need to get this field out of here. Now I can do the same thing with column labels, but my options will always be different based on the type of information that I have. In this case, I have dates, so it's going to give me different options. It gives me date filters instead of label filters, and there's a lot of great ones in here. I can do this quarter, next quarter, year to date, all sorts of things, dates in a specific period, a specific quarter if I want to pick that out. I can also do a custom filter, and that allows me to punch in specific information. I'm going to come back in here though, change this to date up here because I want to work with the months instead of the quarters. And I can come to value filters and also use those, top 10, things like that. Sometimes those are kind of meaningless depending on what type of data you're working with. But let's say I wanted to use this for a specific purpose of before, and I'm going to come in here and say before, and I have a drop down. And I'm going to say I want everything that was before, let's say April 15th. I want it all to be before tax day. And I say OK. Now it has filtered my pivot table where the only files processed that are being added together are the ones that happened before April 15th. So that's really handy. You can also, as you probably saw from the drop down, you can do between, and that works really well if you want to do specific customized days that you're filtering. But as I said before, if I want to clear the filters, I can clear it that way. That just cleared it off of quarters. And I can also come in under just date and clear that if I still had one on there. Sometimes that happens. You forget that you have a filter on a lower level field. So just keep that in mind when you're working with multiple fields. But that's the basics of using filters. As you saw, there's probably an endless supply of filters that you can do, an endless amount of variations. So it's nice to work with and just see what you can come up with.